Rome's rise was no accident. It was a storm of steel, discipline, and blood. The Eternal City didn't just build monuments. It built terror. Enemies didn't speak of aqueducts or Senate laws. They whispered names, names that froze blood, names that made kings tremble before an eagle standard ever appeared on the horizon. Tonight, we're counting down the commanders who turned fear itself into a weapon. Men who didn't just win battles, they changed the way entire nations thought. And the one who stands above them all, so feared, even Hannibal, the terror of Rome, admitted his dread of him. When a Roman army was on the march, the ground shook and scouts never returned. But worse than the sight of steel was the sound of a name. A single word strong enough to scatter tribes, force kings to negotiate, and empty battlefields before the fight began. That is the true test of fear and the heart of our ranking today. They called him the last Roman, and honestly, it's a title that barely scratches the surface of his huge achievement. But his enemies, they probably called him something far less flattering. Perhaps the grim negotiator or Attila's enemy. You see, by 451 AD, the Western Roman Empire wasn't just declining, it was breathing its last. A crumbling giant held together by spit and prayer. Its once mighty armies were a patchwork, a desperate mixture of mercenaries and foederati. Barbarian allies settled within Roman borders, often as unpredictable as they were necessary. Then the unthinkable happened. Attila, the Hun, the self-proclaimed scourge of God, spilled over the Rhine. His horde, a terrifying crowd numbering in the hundreds of thousands, was a force of total destruction, attacking cities like Metz and relentlessly pushing towards Orleans. This wasn't just a raid, it was a threat to their very existence, an apocalypse on horseback. Who could possibly stand against such a force? Enter Flavius Aetius. This wasn't a man born to easy victories. He'd spent time as a hostage among both the Goths and the Huns in his youth, an experience that gave him an unmatched close understanding of their languages, cultures, and most importantly, their military tactics. This unique perspective became his greatest strength. He knew Attila, he knew how the Hun fought, and he knew how to unite a broken world against him. Aetius rode out, not with a purely Roman army, but with a desperate, unlikely coalition. He brought together former enemies, Visigoths, Alans, Burgundians, Franks, convincing them that the Hunnic threat went beyond their petty fights. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If Attila wasn't stopped, all of Western Europe would fall. The two titans met on the Catalonian plains. Aetius, with his diverse coalition, faced Attila's seemingly unstoppable wave. This wasn't a brute force fistfight. It was a chess match played with human lives. Aetius, using his close knowledge of Hunnic tactics, used the terrain like a seasoned wrestler uses the ropes of a ring. He let the Huns charge uphill onto a strategically important ridge, exhausting them, then countercharged with a furious wave of Visigoth cavalry. At the exact moment Attila committed his reserves. The result, the Hunnic advance stopped cold. Attila, for the first time, was denied a clear victory. Aetius didn't completely destroy the Huns, but he broke their image of being unbeatable, preventing their further advance into Roman territory. The alliance held. The Western Empire brought another generation of shaky existence, a delay of execution in the face of certain decline. Aetius shows up at number 5 because fear for him was a diplomatic tool as much as a battlefield reality. He kept the empire alive, not just by winning battles, but by making barbarians more scared of betraying him than of obeying him. He used their fear of Attila, yes, but also created a deep respect, and perhaps even a subtle dread for his own cleverness and determination. Not bad for a man who started life as a political pawn, a hostage among the very people he would one day confront. His genius lay in understanding his enemies so completely that he could turn their own strengths against them, postponing the certain collapse of an empire that was already on its knees. If you've ever found yourself driving through the rolling, green English countryside and wondered why so many of those ancient roads are suspiciously straight, well, you can lay the blame squarely at the feet of this man, Gnaeus Julius Agricola. From 77 to 84 AD, Agricola took Britain, a wild, untamed frontier often dismissed as a rainy afterthought by the important people in Rome, and began the difficult process of transforming it into Rome's private farm. This wasn't just about conquest, it was about integration, about making the distant misty isle permanently Roman. Agricola wasn't just a good general, he was a forward-thinking governor. He certainly won major battles like the decisive victory at Mons, Gropius in Caledonia, where his legions caused shocking casualties on the native tribes. But the true terror he inspired, the fear that seeped into the very soul of Britain, lay not just in his battlefield skill, but in what came next. Imagine this. You're a tribal leader watching as Roman roads, those impossibly straight lines of stone and gravel, begin to slice through your ancestral territories. They weren't just routes for business. They were pathways for armies, allowing rapid troop movements across hostile terrain. Then came the forts, not just isolated outposts, but an ever-expanding network, a visible, undeniable statement of Roman permanence appearing every dozen miles or so, asserting control, denying freedom. Agricola's genius extended beyond military might. He put into practice a policy that we might call recruit, then Romanize. He understood that lasting conquest wasn't just about the sword. It was about blending cultures. He encouraged the construction of Roman-style towns, complete with forums and public baths, and promoted Roman education for the sons of native leaders. The goal: to build loyalty, to integrate the local elites, to make them see the advantages of Roman civilization, thereby starving any future rebellions of local support. It was a subtle, sneaky form of conquest, far more lasting than any single battle. Culgacus, the Caledonian leader, famously spoke of this chilling reality, complaining that Rome makes a dessert and calls it peace. That quote survives, echoing through the centuries precisely because it was so deeply true. Agricola's brilliance was in making the Roman sword feel completely inevitable. Resistance, no matter how fierce, seemed pointless. Surrender, with its promise of Roman order and a semblance of peace, felt less frightening than continued, bloody, and ultimately doomed defiance. The psychological grid he laid over Britain, a grid of roads, forts, and cultural influence, lasted for centuries, shaping the island's destiny. He clocks in at number 4 because while the Britons certainly feared him, the Roman Senate, ironically, feared his ambition even more. Great generals in the late Republic and early Empire were always viewed with suspicion. The Civil War of 69 CE had shown what could happen when a successful commander gained too much power. Emperor Domitian, consumed by jealousy, recalled Agricola early, perhaps fearing that his continued triumphs might overshadow the emperor himself. Yet even this political curtailment couldn't erase the deep psychological mark Agricola left on Britain, nor the chilling efficiency with which he extended Rome's reach to its northernmost limits. His legacy is a stark reminder that conquest isn't always loud and bloody. Sometimes it's a quiet, unstoppable spread, a creeping inevitability that inspires its own unique brand of fear. Imagine the absolute worst public relations disaster in Roman history, a national trauma that echoed through generations. We're talking about the Teutoburg Forest 09 AD, 3 entire legions, 17, 18, 19, wiped out, destroyed in the dark, unforgiving forests of Germany. Their eagles, the sacred symbols of Roman might and honor, were lost, captured by the very barbarians Rome sought to control. Emperor Augustus, an old man by then, was said to have paced his palace halls for months, banging his head against the walls, screaming in pain, "Quintilius Verus, give me back my legions." It was a wound that festered, a humiliation that Rome desperately needed to avenge. Germanicus Julius Caesar was the answer. Adopted son of Tiberius, nephew to the emperor, he was thrust into command of the Rhine legions in 14 AD, with one clear, unspoken mission: restore Rome's honor. The pressure must have been immense. This wasn't just about winning, it was about psychological payback, about sending a clear, terrifying message to the Germanic tribes. Rome remembers, and Rome repays its debts with interest. From 14 to 16 AD, Germanicus launched a series of brutal, methodical campaigns deep into Germania. He wasn't just fighting battles, he was conducting a symphony of revenge. He marched his legions, supported by river fleets to ensure steady supply lines, into Arminius's own forest turf, a place that had become a graveyard for Roman hopes. He fought Arminius, the very chieftain who had planned the Teutoburg ambush in major battles, forcing him to stand and face Roman might in open terrain, a stark contrast to the ambush tactics that had brought Verus down. At the Battle of the Weser River, also known as Ides de Viso, Germanicus showcased his tactical brilliance. He baited the Carusi into attacking a seemingly isolated Roman detachment, then released hidden auxiliaries and hammered them against the river, causing immense casualties. This wasn't just a victory, it was a systematic dismantling of the Germanic coalition. a public demonstration that Rome had learned its lessons and was now operating with cold, calculated efficiency. But perhaps the most chilling act of all came afterward. Germanicus personally led his legions to the site of the Teutoburg disaster. There they found the bleached bones of their fallen comrades, still scattered across the forest floor, and, as Tacitus recorded, severed skulls nailed to trees. In a solemn, grim ceremony, Germanicus had his men bury the remains, a powerful symbolic middle finger to the Germanic tribes. It was a declaration that Rome would never forget, and that their dead would be honored, their sacrifice avenged. This act strengthened the legion's morale and sent a shiver down the spines of any German who heard of it. The tribes never again formed a large coalition against him. The message was received. Germanicus lands at number 3 because every Germanic storyteller, every chieftain around every forest fire knew that the name Germanicus meant payback on horseback, a relentless, unyielding force of Roman revenge. His early death in 19 AD, possibly from poison, only magnified his legend. He became the man Rome could not outlast, the general whose very presence filled people with such fear that even the Emperor Tiberius grew wary of his popularity and military success. Eventually recalling him, Germanicus was Rome's avenging angel, a testament to the terrifying power of Roman determination. Conqueror of Gaul, crosser of the Rubicon, dodger of daggers, until of course he didn't. Gaius Julius Caesar. The name itself means Roman power, ambition, and a military genius so deep it borders on the mythological. Caesar's battlefield record isn't just impressive, it's ridiculous. A seemingly endless parade of impossible victories that reshaped the map and the course of history. Think about it. The Siege of Alesia, a masterclass in military engineering and psychological warfare. Here Caesar faced the combined might of Gaul led by the brilliant Vercingetorix, who had rallied dozens of tribes against Roman rule. Caesar didn't just lay siege to the Gallic stronghold. He built 2 massive walls, a circumvallation to keep Vercingetorix and his forces trapped inside, and a contivallation facing outwards to keep a massive Gallic relief army out. His legions, already exhausted, were now fighting a war on 2 fronts, literally surrounded themselves. The Gauls inside Alesia, their supplies running low, expelled their non-combatants, women, children, the elderly, in a desperate attempt to save resources. Caesar, in a move of chilling practicality, refused them passage through his lines. These innocent souls were left to starve in the no-man's land between the 2 armies, a grim sight that was both a human tragedy and a brutal stroke of psychological warfare. Designed to break the morale of the defenders, it worked. The sheer boldness, the methodical brutality, the engineering marvel of it all, it broke the Gauls. Then there's Pharsalus, where he decisively beat Pompey, despite being outnumbered 2-1, a victory that shattered the senatorial faction and paved his path to absolute power. And Munda, where in a desperate struggle, he personally led the legendary 10th Legion into the teeth of the enemy line, turning the tide of battle through sheer force of will and personal courage. What made him truly terrifying wasn't just the sheer number of his wins, nor the tactical brilliance, though that was undeniable. It was his speed. Caesar marched faster than anyone thought possible, often covering distances in days that would take other armies weeks. He struck quicker, appearing seemingly out of nowhere. Celtic kings would wake to find Roman camps already dug on their doorsteps, the bread still warm from Roman ovens. This lightning-fast movement, combined with his ruthless efficiency, created a paralyzing sense of inevitability. You couldn't outrun him, and you couldn't hide. Caesar was also a master of psychological warfare, though perhaps not in the way barbarians practiced it. While other armies screamed and shouted, the Roman legions under Caesar often advanced in disciplined, chilling silence, a tactic that unnerved enemies who expected loud war cries. This cold, mechanical advance, every step calculated, every shield tightly packed, signaled an unstoppable force, a killing machine that didn't need to howl to create fear. He was also known for his calculated mercy, often forgiving more enemies than his peers, a strategy that could win him allies. But even this had its limits. When the political cost of mercy grew too high, or when an enemy proved too troublesome, Caesar could be totally ruthless. Even his own officers slept uneasy sometimes, wondering which casual breakfast conversation might end with the pointed, "You're in command until I return," a clear signal of an unexpected and dangerous assignment. His charisma was absolute, his authority unquestioned, and his capacity for ruthlessness boundless. Caesar claimed silver because fear followed him like a loyal, ever-present dog, right up the steps of the Senate House. He wasn't just a general, he was a force of nature, a living embodiment of Roman power, and the dread he inspired was a fundamental part of his legend, a cornerstone of his empire-building legacy. His ambition, his speed, his tactical genius, and his chilling capacity for both mercy and cruelty made him a figure of deep awe and terror across the ancient world. Now we arrive at the top, the man who stands above all others in the Hall of Fame of Roman dread, Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus. He was just 25 years old when he walked into Spain, a land where his father and uncle had both fallen to Carthaginian blades, cut down by the relentless enemy. This personal tragedy, this deep loss, fueled a burning ambition, a belief that the entire Western Mediterranean needed a new landlord, and that landlord would be Rome. By the tender age of 23, Scipio had already captured New Carthage, the logistical heart of Carthaginian Spain, cutting off a vital artery of supply and communication for Rome's arch-enemy. This wasn't just a city, it was a statement. He then moved on to Aleppo, where he faced a larger Carthaginian army. Here Scipio unveiled a tactical masterpiece, the reverse order deployment. He intentionally placed his weaker troops in the center, his elite legions on the wings, a move that went against conventional military wisdom. Then, at the crucial moment, he wheeled his powerful wings inward, like a collapsing tent, smashing the Carthaginian lines and securing a decisive victory. It was a brilliant counterintuitive move that showed his willingness to innovate and adapt, even learning from Hannibal's own tactics of feints and distractions. But the true masterpiece, the battle that cemented his legendary status and changed the course of Western history, was Zama in 202 BC. Think about the context. Hannibal, the boogeyman, the man who had haunted Roman nightmares for decades, the general who had caused the most crushing defeats on Rome, stood arrayed against him. Hannibal, with his war elephants, his seasoned veterans, and his unmatched reputation, was finally back on African soil, ready for a showdown. Scipio didn't just meet him, he outmaneuvered him, outfought him, and ultimately broke him. Hannibal deployed his fearsome war elephants, hoping to create chaos among the Roman ranks. But Scipio had expected this. He countered by ordering his legions to open lanes, creating corridors for the elephants to charge through harmlessly, neutralizing their terrifying impact. It was a stroke of genius, turning Hannibal's greatest weapon into a problem. The battle raged, a brutal clash of titans, but the decisive blow came from Scipio's masterful use of cavalry. Having initially driven off the Carthaginian horse, his Numidian cavalry, led by the brilliant Massinissa, returned at the critical moment, crashing into Hannibal's rear, sealing the Carthaginian fate. Carthage sued for peace, its power broken. Rome, no longer just a regional power, became an empire, its destiny permanently forged on the sands of Zama. Scipio was the architect of this new world order. Scipio Africanus tops this list because the fear he inspired wasn't just in his enemy's soldiers, it was in their greatest general. Even Hannibal, years later, sipping wine in exile, when asked who the greatest generals were, listed Alexander, then Pyrrhus, and then himself. But when pressed on who he would have ranked if he had defeated Scipio, Hannibal allegedly responded that he would have placed himself before all others. But then, with a wry smile, he admitted that Scipio was the only man alive he truly feared. When the greatest general of your age, the man who had terrorized Rome for a generation, says that about you, you're not just feared, you're not just a tough opponent, you are the benchmark for fear itself. Scipio Africanus didn't just win a war, he won the psychological battle against Rome's most enduring nightmare, securing his place as the most feared commander in Roman history. So there they are. Aetius, the cunning coalition builder who stared down the Hunnic apocalypse. Agricola, the relentless road layer who wove Roman control into the very fabric of Britain. Germanicus, the avenger who made Germania tremble and reclaimed Rome's lost honor. Caesar, the whirlwind who redefined speed and psychological warfare, whose very name commanded dread. And Scipio, the elephant dancer who conquered Rome's ultimate boogeyman, Hannibal himself. Each of these men, in their own unique, terrifying way, turned the Roman eagles into something far more than mere symbols. They transformed them into grim promises, promises that the legions were coming, that their disciplined, relentless advance was inevitable, and that no fortress, no thick forest, no barbarian order, no matter how vast or fierce, could ultimately stop them? Which commander makes your hair stand on end? Whose name still sends a shiver down your spine? Drop your own ranking below. Challenge a friend to debate your choices. And remember, in the ancient world where empires rose and fell on the strength of their armies, fear wasn't just an emotion, it was just another word for survival.